He was born into silence. Not the kind of silence that brings peace, but the kind that carries weight, the silence of secrets, control, and invisible chains. His mother screamed when she gave birth, but her cries were muffled with a cloth. Noise was a sin during birthing. Pain was to be endured in reverence. The child was born under candlelight, in a stone room beneath the sanctuary, as chants echoed softly through the ceiling. He never had a birth certificate. He never saw a hospital. His first recorded identity was a page in the chosen ledger, a sacred book of names that only elders could touch. The compound was deep in the hills of an unnamed Eastern European forest, closed off from civilization. A high wooden fence wrapped around it like a curse. Inside were 30 families who believed they were the last hope of salvation in a corrupted world. No internet. No television. No books except the Holy Scroll. Outsiders were called the Fallen. Their world, the Burning Kingdom. He grew up believing he was chosen, special, protected. He didn't know he was in a cage. The day began before the sun. At 4:30 a.m., the bell rang once. If you didn't appear in the prayer hall within 5 minutes, you were marked. Marked meant no food for a day, or sometimes lashes with a discipline rod. The prayer hall had no seats. You knelt on stone floors for 2 hours while Elder Tobias read from the scroll and chanted in an ancient tongue that even he didn't fully understand. Children sat in the back, boys on one side, girls on the other. They weren't allowed to look around. If your eyes wandered, you were summoned and shamed. At 8 a.m., school began. But it wasn't school. It was indoctrination. They studied one subject, the scroll. Lessons on obedience, silence, endurance. Once a month, a visiting shepherd would quiz them, "What is freedom?" And they had to answer, "The illusion of Satan." Laughter was punished. Curiosity was labeled demonic. Asking why was the first step toward exile. He once saw a boy ask why they couldn't play music. The next day, the boy's bed was empty. He was never mentioned again. At 5 years old, he broke a ceramic cup during kitchen duty. A simple accident. The cup slipped from his small fingers. But accidents didn't exist in the chosen light. Only sin. He was dragged to the front of the chapel that evening during community confession. His mother wept silently beside him, but did not intervene. Elder Tobias held the broken cup in one hand and the rod of purity in the other. He quoted Leviticus, then struck the boy across his back 3 times. "Pain is the teacher the world rejects," he said. "But here, it is love." The next day, no one spoke to him. Not even his siblings. Not his friends. He was invisible, a ghost in a living body. That was called the silence ritual. It was used on children who needed to feel the weight of isolation. It lasted a week. By the time the silence ended, he had learned his place. Obedience was not requested. It was demanded and worshipped. He was 10 when he found the book. It was hidden behind the barn, beneath a pile of rotting hay and rusted tools. The cover was torn. The title half-faded. But the contents were unlike anything he'd ever seen. It was a science book, meant for 6th graders, filled with diagrams of planets, atoms, rain cycles. Real names. Real facts. He was mesmerized. He took it to the latrine, reading it in 3-minute intervals, terrified someone would notice he was taking too long. He memorized pages in his mind, repeating them to himself during morning chants. For the first time in his life, the stars had names. Not just celestial eyes of judgment, but Mars, Venus, Jupiter. That week, he dared to ask a question in class. If God made the earth in 6 days, who made the planets? The silence was sharp. Sister Miriam stared at him for a long time. Then calmly said, "You must fast for 3 days. And write the forgiveness verse 200 times. He obeyed. But inside, something had changed. He had touched the forbidden. And instead of feeling shame, he felt alive. He was 11 the first time he doubted out loud. It happened in the laundry room, a dark, damp space at the back of the chapel, where the women and children scrubbed robes in icy water. His friend Micah was next to him, elbow deep in soap. "Micah," he whispered, glancing around, "do you think the stars are angels like they say? Or could they be something else? Micah stiffened. His hands stopped moving. "You can't say that," Micah hissed, his eyes wide with fear. "They hear everything." "But what if—" he started again. "No." Micah grabbed his arm hard. "Don't ever ask that again. Not unless you're ready to disappear." He didn't sleep that night. Not because he feared being caught, but because the question wouldn't leave him alone. If they lied about the stars, what else did they lie about? It was buried beneath a collapsed shed at the edge of the compound, a small, dusty radio covered in plastic and mud. He found it while helping clear fallen timber after a storm. His heart pounded as he brushed it clean. The buttons were cracked, but it still worked. That night, beneath his blanket, he turned the dial, slowly, carefully. Static. Then a voice. English. Fast and bright. "This is Voice of Liberty Radio, coming to you from London." London. What was London? He listened every night for a week, learning about a world he had never imagined. Politics, music, laughter, people who disagreed with their leaders and weren't punished. He cried the night he heard a woman say, "Everyone has the right to choose what to believe." In his world, belief was not a choice. It was a prison. He met her at the outer fence. He was sent to deliver a message to a supplier, one of the few trusted outsiders allowed limited contact. The supplier had a daughter. Her name was Lena. She wore jeans, bright blue ones, and a pink sweater with a little heart stitched over the chest. Her hair was curly and free, and she smiled without caution. "You're from that place, aren't you?" she asked. "The religious one?" He looked down, afraid to answer. "I've seen you before," she said gently. "You don't have to stay there, you know. You could come out." He shook his head. "I'd burn." She looked confused, then sad. She reached into her backpack and handed him something, a small paperback book titled Questions They're Afraid You'll Ask. He hid it under his shirt and ran back to the compound. He read it every night in secret. And with each page, the bars of his mental cage rattled a little louder. By the time he turned 15, he knew he had to leave. He watched the gate schedules, noted which shepherds fell asleep during night watch, buried food under the garden bed, hid old clothes beneath the compost heap. He met Lena twice more at the edge of the woods. She promised she'd be waiting with her cousin's car on the night of the full moon. But that night, she didn't come. He waited for hours, then crept into the woods anyway. He walked for miles, alone, cold, hungry, terrified, but not turning back, because the unknown, for the first time in his life, felt safer than what he had left behind. He didn't have a plan, just a direction, a way. He ran through the forest all night, guided by the moonlight and the echo of his own heartbeat. The branches cut his skin, his feet bled through his socks, and every sound felt like a search party closing in. But no one came after him. He emerged from the trees near a gas station, his first real sight of modern life. The glowing signs, cars, people, laughter. And for the first time, he understood what fear truly meant. The world was too loud, too bright, too fast. He didn't know what money was, didn't know what a phone was. He flinched every time someone looked at him, expecting a sermon or a slap. He spent his first night in a train station bathroom stall, curled up on the floor, cold, hungry, afraid, but free. And yet, something inside whispered, "You made a mistake." The next few weeks blurred. He ate food from trash bins, slept beneath park benches, spoke to no one. The few times he tried, his words came out stilted and strange. His accent was thick with ritual, his eyes too wide. One afternoon, a woman offered him a sandwich. He stared at it for a long time before accepting. He said, "Blessings be upon your house." She laughed awkwardly. He didn't understand money. He walked into a store once and tried to take a bottle of water, thinking the outside world was as communal as the compound. He was thrown out. The police questioned him once. He gave them a fake name and made up a story about being homeschooled in the mountains. They shrugged and let him go. He found an old backpack and stuffed it with newspapers, wrappers, anything that felt like comfort. He began keeping a notebook, a cheap one he found in a dumpster, where he wrote down everything he saw. Airplanes, Wi-Fi, tattoos, dogs on leashes, women in pants, men crying. Freedom. But freedom felt empty without meaning. It came one night, sudden and brutal. He had found shelter in the basement of an abandoned building. It was quiet, dark, the kind of place that reminded him of home, only colder. That night, he dreamed of Elder Tobias. In the dream, the elder said, "You can run from the fire, but the fire is in you now." He woke up screaming. His hands trembled. His skin itched. He clawed at his arms, convinced they were crawling with sin. He wept, prayed, begged for forgiveness. A man from the building above found him and called for help. The next thing he knew, he was in a white room with soft lights and soft voices. The nurses were kind. Too kind. He didn't trust them. A doctor diagnosed him with PTSD, religious trauma, and severe anxiety. They offered him pills. He refused. Pills, he'd been taught, were instruments of possession. Instead, he stared out the window for days, afraid to sleep, afraid to remember, afraid to feel. It was during his third week that a therapist asked him a question no one had ever asked before. "What do you believe?" And for the first time in his life, he didn't know how to answer. When he left the hospital, he had nowhere to go. He wandered, slept in parks, shelters, under bridges. He learned to blend in with other ghosts, people the world forgot. He heard laughter, music, arguments, the sounds of life. But he couldn't join in. He once tried attending a church. The hymns triggered panic. The cross on the wall made his heart race. He ran out before the service ended. He tried to work, sweeping floors at a mechanic's shop. But he froze every time someone gave him an order. His body reacted with obedience. His mind with fear. He quit after 2 days. He started drinking. Not for fun. He didn't understand fun. But to forget. To blur the edges of memory. People mocked him. Called him crazy. Said he should go back to where he came from. But there was no going back. His soul was untethered. And he was drowning in a freedom that felt like exile. It happened on a rainy Tuesday. He was sitting outside a bookstore, soaked, shivering, holding a crumpled paper cup he had found on the sidewalk. People passed without seeing him, just like always. But then a woman stopped. She was in her late 30s. Sharp eyes. Kind smile. She didn't offer pity. She offered presence. "You okay?" she asked gently. He looked away. Mumbled something about being fine. She left. He thought that was the end of it. But 10 minutes later, she returned, not with food, not with cash, but with a book. "The Body Keeps the Score," the title said. "It's about trauma," she told him. "And survival. I thought of you." He didn't open it for days. Just carried it like a treasure. Eventually, he read the first page. It didn't talk about sin, or damnation, or obedience. It talked about pain, memory, healing, and for the first time, he felt seen. He began visiting the library. Not to talk, just to sit. Warmth, silence, safety. The librarian noticed him but never questioned. She just smiled and pointed him to the psychology section. He read everything. Books on trauma, abuse, religious control, cults. He learned a new language, a language that gave him words for what had been done to him. Words like gaslighting, spiritual abuse, religious trauma syndrome, coercive control. He realized the compound wasn't a sanctuary. It was a cage, a system designed not to enlighten, but to dominate. He began writing again, not just journals, but long letters to himself, to the boy he had been, to the man he was becoming. Each word was a wound being stitched. He stopped using his old name. It was tied to pain, spoken in rituals, shouted during punishments. He chose a new one with no history, a blank slate. He applied for an ID card, a birth certificate, legal records. It was hard. He had no proof of existence. But eventually, with help, he built one. He got a job at a small cafe, washing dishes. Simple. Quiet. Honest. He rented a room, just one bed, one lamp, one door with a lock he controlled. He started therapy. Weekly. He cried for the first time, not in punishment, but in grief. Grief for the childhood stolen. The faith manipulated. The fear that never belonged to him. It had been 3 years since he escaped when he saw the video. A YouTuber had posted a documentary on secret religious communes in Eastern Europe. One of the images showed the compound, the old gate, still standing. His chest tightened. His hands trembled. But instead of turning it off, he watched. And then, he did something terrifying. He reached out to the filmmaker. He told his story. Anonymously at first. Then publicly. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of messages. Some angry. But most from others like him. People who had escaped similar places, who had never spoken until now. He started a podcast. Then a blog. Then a support group. Not as a victim, but as a voice. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was helping others find their way out of the dark. In one interview, a journalist asked, "Do you still believe in God?" He paused. Long and heavy. Then he answered, "I don't know what God is. But I know what love is. And I know that love never beat me. Never silenced me. Never told me I was unworthy." He looked into the camera. "If there is a God, I think He wants me free." To anyone watching who grew up in fear, who was told questions were sin, who was punished for curiosity, shamed for wanting more, you are not alone. Your story matters. You are not broken, you were wounded. And wounds can heal. You can reclaim your life. And one day, maybe even help others do the same. Don't suffer in silence. Don't carry shame that doesn't belong to you. Speak. Cry. Rage. Heal. This is not the end of your story. If this story moved you, if you've been through something similar, or if you simply believe these stories deserve to be told, white heavy checkmark, subscribe to The Real Truth, truthlineofficial. Red heart, share this video, someone you know may need it. Candle, leave a comment, I believe you. For everyone still in silence. This channel is for voices the world tried to silence. But we will not be quiet.